Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole Board meeting. Let's get started with roll call. Director Barrows,
Here.
Director Sprawl,
Here.
Director Smith,
Here.
Director Zavala,
Here.
and I am here. So we are starting our meeting and I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Snell.
Thank you, Director Decker. I do have just a short superintendent report, and then I'll turn it over, and Brett and I will tag team some of the contracts and future agenda items that we have for the February 11th board meeting. I just wanted to remind you and folks, I know you don't need any reminder, but our capital levy renewal is up here. Ballots are probably starting to drop, and people are getting those in the mail. There's some literature that we're able to provide as a district. It's also going to be out in the community. This is a renewal of our expiring technology levy that will expire next December 31st. We did some listening sessions related to safety, did some analysis of our internal needs, infrastructure with technology and capital projects. You all adopted a resolution in November, and we've been communicating out that information since. These are some of the things that the resources that are going to be delivered with a successful passage, including some of our devices that have been historically what's been a part of the tech levy, a lot of infrastructure around our network, filtering safety, cybersecurity, also some future tech needs. We talked about just the emergence of AI and what does that look like, and not really sure the educational landscape over the duration of this levy, what might be needed for our students, some subscriptions related to curriculum instruction, communications. Also, we included some safety features, which have become more digital and technology through the years, including camera updates, locking systems for controlled entrances, and possible weapons detection devices and software as well. And then also some capital project needs, which can include like roofs or HVAC or things like that. So this has been what we've communicated. We've also included the board's desire to keep a very consistent tax rate over time. The orange part of the bar chart is the part related to the capital levy. You can see that that rate expands when we're paying down some of our existing bonds, and this kind of addresses those long-term capital levy needs that when we don't have a bond in place that we might need to, take care of these facilities that the community has supported us having. So just short and sweet, I know, but I want to get it out there, see if there's any questions or comments before we start previewing the February board agenda.
I've seen some signs up around the community. Is there a place to get yard signs if somebody does want to support the levy?
Well, that would be handled through the Citizens Committee, so I would encourage people to reach out via social media or whatever to that committee, and they can help with signs or whatever else that they want to do. Okay, Director Decker, is it okay then to move into the agenda planning?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll pull that up. And we have a few contracts. The first one is a kind of unique. It's a placeholder. I'll take this one, Brett. So, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Basically, there's IEP Online is going to do like a reboot this year. And so as we looked at that, we also thought it would be important to look at other potential vendors. And so right now we have a survey open with special education staff and general ed staff about some of the services that IEP Online has provided through the years. And if synergy, if we went in a different direction, what that might look like. So just trying to collect input. If we keep with IEP on online, we don't have necessarily a timeline, but if we were to make a move to Synergy, then to do that would take some time. And so this is a placeholder based on the outcome of input from our staff. So it's as likely to be pulled as it would be to be seen on the agenda in February, but we did want to put it together and put it to your attention. Pause and see if there are any questions about this one.
You said there's a survey going out to staff.
Yes.
When is that, like, is it already sent out, and like how long do staff have to?
They have about 2 weeks. It was sent out. There's also a couple of listening sessions if people don't want to do a survey and just kind of share their experience. Just initially looking at it, some people who have had experience with the Synergy product in Oregon reported some favorable experiences, but it's hard to know when you have a reboot on the existing versus like something that's unknown. It's
Yeah.
kind of challenging to manage that. There's some open-ended questions too in the survey just about training needs and what you want that to look like. Regardless if we bring this contract for your consideration or not, there's going to need to be some support for staff in the migration to either the new IEP online or a different platform.
Yeah. Is there, you might, I don't know if you know this or not. So I could ask like Daniel if I need to, but is there like a main like repository or online database where all of the special ed records are housed for a student? I mean, it used to be where they were like paper files in, and now I assume everything is like an online database. So is there something other than, like, are they housed somewhere other than IEP Online, or is IEP Online where all the special ed records are housed? Because that would be one of my concerns with migrating, is how all of the historical records would also track as well.
Yeah, those are some concerns I think shared by the leadership team of any sort of migration. Right now, part of the challenge with IEP Online is the way it communicates on the back end with Synergy and reporting.
Yeah.
So there's some consideration for alignment there, but also the reason we have this as a placeholder is because of the time it takes to migrate that information, Director Barrows, and making sure there's enough time to do some of that. Um,
Yeah.
so
So
we'll
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, do you anticipate by our February meeting that we would know whether or not we want to have a grid, that's what we're going to move forward with or not?
Yeah, we would know before your February meeting. If it was
Okay.
going to be Synergy, we would need to like have plans to initiate this, and so we'd need to review all the input from staff, make a recommendation. If it's to stay the course with the IEP Online, then we'd just pull this item.
Yeah. Another consideration would just be the number of districts that use IEP Online. Just because, like, you can, like, working in Evergreen, if I need to request records for a student in Vancouver, like, I just hit a couple buttons and it like sends the request to like the Vancouver IEP Online system, and so if you're using a completely different system, like the way that records are going to get transferred over is going to be a little trickier. There's some districts that don't use it and it makes it a little bit harder. So um, I don't know, just
Yeah,
something to kind of
that
consider.
that
But
definitely was something that came up from the team
okay.
already of that transferability across platforms. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I just wanted to make you aware of it. Some
Okay,
work to try to make an informed decision and some timeliness of it. So we'll keep you updated on that.
thank you. Any other questions?
All right, I'll go ahead and jump in with on the last two items in the contract section, and then a couple items that were agendized under teaching and learning, but they're really kind of in that contract mode for previewing for potential action in February's board meetings. So the first two within the contract section of the agenda are exciting opportunities that we have thanks to a grant that we received directly from Clark PUD. As you know, we've been lucky enough to be successful with grant applications for electric buses. We'll now be up to 13 when the ones that are currently ordered are delivered, all of them subsidized through grants through the Department of Ecology. This particular grant will upgrade our infrastructure to make sure that we have the highest bandwidth of charging capacity for those electric buses, so that we can have great service and continuity with those, even in cold weather and everything else. So the first one is a recommendation to approve purchase agreement number 2025-003 with Sparkstone Electrical Group. And this is really, I guess, the equivalent of a home breaker box, but it's obviously much more robust and higher capacity, but it acts similar to that. The amount on that would be $52,927 plus Washington State sales tax. And then I'll just preview the other one, which the amount is to be determined based on an active bid that we're out right now. The bids will be received on the day of the board meeting, so we'll be able to substitute in the exact cost from the low bidder from that action, but we want to be able to move quickly with that vendor. And so bid award number 2024-050 is capacity up to $300,000 plus Washington sales tax. And again, that would be the actual electrical contractor that would come in and install all of the equipment, connect everything, and draw additional power from the street poles. So a couple related to that electrical upgrade at transportation. Any questions on either of those two? All right, then if I can just jump ahead, because we're kind of in the same vein of previewing action items for the February board meeting. Down under teaching and learning, item number 5 is a recommendation to approve resolution number 929, which is a renewal of a memorandum of agreement, between Vancouver Public Schools and Clark College. And again, this is the last month you approved a contract with WSU for iTech students to be able to access college level classes. This is the Clark College equivalent. It's been in place since iTech opened on that site. And so our recommendation is to continue that access of that successful program. Any questions on that? All right, then we'll move on to our last item as a preview of the February board meeting anyway, and it's the recommendation to approve revised associated student body bylaws for Columbia River High School and Fort Vancouver High School. And their amendments to their bylaws are to create new clubs at Columbia River High School. Their request is to create a Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America Club. Acronym would be FCCLA apparently. And at Fort Vancouver, they would like to add a ASB club for Green Team and Black Student Union. So any questions on those requests to create some new clubs at those high schools? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brett. We do have 4 policy, well, 3 kind of traditional policies and then a calendar one. So I'll turn it over to Taylor to walk through the first 3.
Great. So we have one policy that will come up for first read. That's on policy 6210, purchasing authorization and control. And this is a recommendation that we adjust the sort of threshold amount for the board to review purchases and contracts. And so that would be an adjustment up to for new expenditures from the district, that the board would review and approve those expenditures if they exceed $150,000 cost to the district per year. That's for new contracts. And then for any renewed contracts, so a contract that has been approved and that is up for renewal in a subsequent year, that the board would review those contracts if the increase in the cost of the contract exceeds 10% since the prior year. So if there's just a modest increase below 10%, then those contracts would only be reviewed and approved on the at the initial time that they come before the board at the $150,000 level. So that is a recommendation to adjust sort of the board financial governance practices that we'll be putting before you all for a first read next month. So maybe I'll pause there and ask if there are questions about that contract.
Taylor,
Policy.
just to review, this was originally brought up to us a couple months ago with the threshold being $250,000, correct?
Yeah, we had been looking at what different thresholds were and kind of tried to do a regional comparison to what other Southwest Washington school districts, what level they have set for board review, as well as looking at what other districts around the state that are of more comparable size to us than some of the Southwest Washington ones. So I think overall, this comes in sort of with a lower threshold for comparable size school districts, but a pretty comparable threshold for Southwest Washington. So that is to say, other Southwest Washington school boards are reviewing contracts at approximately this same value level and higher. But other school districts around the state that are, in the 20,000 student range, a number of them have even higher thresholds. So the board is not reviewing the contract until it is at like a $250,000 level. So this represents an increase from what we had in the past or what we currently have, but we think makes sense given the size of the district and the size of our budget and wanting to be both efficient with our purchases and our expenditure process and make sure that the board has sufficient oversight.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Okay, and then we'll also be bringing 2 policies for second read and your consideration of approval next month. We've reviewed those a couple of times, but just for quick refresher, policy 3420, anaphylaxis prevention and response, adds that schools will maintain a supply of epinephrine nasal spray. And then policy 3424, opioid related overdose reversal, updates our policy to be in line with the standing order to allow any person, including students and staff, to carry opioid reversal medication on campus. All right, there's no questions. I'll turn it back to Dr. Snell.
Thank you, Taylor. The last one under policy is the district approves an annual school calendar each year. That's done. We bring forward a draft for your consideration after we get input from our labor leaders, as well as just reviewing and trying to think about all the logistical constraints of a calendar and trying to have a good approach. This calendar, I'd like to just highlight a couple of things that are unique to it. We've had trying to build in snow days, like knock on wood, but fortunately we haven't used those this year to date, but that's included in this as well. There's a couple of days in one in March and one in April. Sometimes in the past, when we've had snow days well before winter break, we've actually used the semester break day. But that gets problematic as you get closer to it. And so we have some language where we don't use a day if it's like a week or so and the snow day happens like the day before. You just don't pivot to that, which can be frustrating sometimes for people, but there's some planning that goes into that. So call those to your attention. We also have some snow days built in at the end of the year, which is nice with this. It would extend into a second week, but it still stays away from the holiday Juneteenth. And so that's always, you kind of want to be on one side of that. We also have Veterans Day falling on a Tuesday, which can be problematic for attendance on Monday. And so we actually have a Monday, Tuesday with this one. We have the traditional Thanksgiving break as well. And then one of the things that's been very successful for our start has been our rolling kindergarten start. And then we have also expanded that to include a sixth grade kickoff, where our sixth grade students are coming to the school first before. And there's been a desire to do the same with ninth grade. We were using like funding like ESSER funds and things like that to make that happen. And we don't have that funding anymore. And so there is an ability to apply for a waiver where you can have a kind of a rolling start for some of our students. So this calendar factors that in. So that on the first day of school would be our first through fifth graders. Kindergartners would be working in the whole week like they have the last couple years. And then our sixth graders and our ninth graders would start that day as well. And then the next day would be everybody starting. And then that builds into our contracted daytime. So we're not compensating additional for that. It's built into our contract with VEA. We would need to receive the waiver from the state, but when we looked at what qualifies for a waiver, that is something that would qualify. And then we need to work with VEA on what do the other teachers do during that day, what's reasonable, and how do we maximize the opportunity to communicate with parents. The other thing that's unique to this calendar is we're applying for a waiver for a professional learning day. That qualifies as well as at least from the literature that supports going for waivers. And we want to do that because the state is looking at revising some learning standards, and we need some time to make sure our staff are ready to teach those standards. And without knowing if the legislature is going to add a learning day in the fall, we think it's wise to give capacity for our staff to be ready for this. So if this is a calendar that you are supportive of in the February, then we would go ahead and apply for the waiver, and it would require a resolution from the board about what we're doing with those days. And so we would prepare that for you as well. I'll pause and see if there are any questions. I've talked a lot about it.
Does it looks like spring break is the first full week of April, which I feel like it usually is like it overlaps March and April. Like it so is spring break like a week later than normal?
You know what?
Just
See,
go
sorry, I
ahead.
just wanted to say that it used to be until very recently, it used to always be the first full week in April. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. So historically, we've always had the first full week in April. So I'm not sure why we left that and now why we're back. But Jeff, sorry.
Yeah, we could go the earlier week or not, but I think as we looked at the date and with the break up the school year and then neighboring school districts as well, this is kind of where it was landed on.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, how this would compare. I mean, I assume there's probably not a lot of difference with like, the winter break and stuff like that, but I was curious how spring break compares because I know we do have a lot of, people that like work in one district and have kids in another district, so just having, if we want to have like, either the week before, or the week after, or whatever, like all of our staff there. I just was curious how it compares to some of the other districts.
In the calendars I've seen, and I have not seen all of them yet, but of the districts that had already shared, it aligns with them.
Okay.
And I can try to confirm with other districts as well prior to February. I think Camas actually has a full week for Thanksgiving as well this year. So there are some unique calendars, but trying to find some alignment on, especially spring break. I think you're right. Director Barros is one that if we're aligned, it's very helpful as we share staff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
It's
I was
always
curious if we can double check with
Mhm.
some of our neighboring districts on that.
it's always helpful though when we avoid aligning with Oregon because the whole state goes on spring break together, and it's nice for us not to have to compete with them for spring break rates.
Thank you for the explanation of the changes. one thing that I think, and I know we've talked to someone about it, but just conferences are gonna look different next year. And so maybe if you want to touch on that, because we don't have the built-in conference days like we have historically.
Yeah, thank you, Director Sproul. One of the things you don't see late early releases on here, like this year we have some Wednesday early releases in addition to the morning or the Monday ones. Part of our agreement with Vancouver Education Association was to extend the time on Mondays and do away with some of the others, including conference week, with the expectation that those Mondays are times to connect with families and coordinate the partnership around the student learning. And so that will look a little different going into next year as we make this change.
Thank you.
I know one of the things you all had talked about too is trying to be consistent for families. And when we have just every once in a while a Wednesday, it can kind of be problematic sometimes for childcare and others. So we're hoping that this does provide more consistency to families. Okay, if you have any other questions about the calendar that come up, just let me know. We'll try to do a little bit more research on other districts prior to you having this as a consideration item in February.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll get out of this screen. Am I still sharing?
Mhm.
Okay. So also, we haven't covered yet under teaching and learning. We do have some new course proposals. These are all CTE courses, I believe, as I reviewed them earlier. I don't know if there are any questions about these. Okay, and then our usual instructional materials review, the reports in here. And again, we've linked now the committee notes as well. It does highlight the intended use, a summary, and if it's challenging content or not. I know we always flag the challenging content, and there is one text for middle school here that has some violence that's linked and referenced here. And the other ones did not have identified challenging content from the IMC, the Instructional Materials Committee. So those are up. And then the last one are 2 out-of-state travels for a festival and a basketball tournament that would be on your agenda. Any questions about those?
And just to clarify for anybody who might be watching or will watch it later, the out-of-state travel is usually funded by the boosters in those schools.
Okay, I think we've gotten through the agenda. As usual, if there's anything else that comes up, we'll flag that for you in your briefing so you can be prepared on February 11th, which is also election day. So that's all we have. I know we'll have an executive session as well. I'll turn it back to you, Director Decker.
All right, so we are now going to meet in an executive session to discuss the performance of a public employee in accordance with RCW 42.30.110 with no action to follow. The board will be in executive session until 6:20.
Yeah, we can come back if we need to, I think, but yeah,
Right.
it's a short one.
Yes, and so if an extension is required, I will come back and let everybody know. So we are going to recess to our executive meeting. Thank you. Good evening. I have returned and it is 6:23 and our committee of the whole meeting is adjourned. Thank you.